case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Rosanna, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Rosanna, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked a scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burned marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believe that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11th, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches. During the struggle with Vanessa, the news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her coworkers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Corina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens. despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m. when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m. when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colon Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature, often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, he did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022 to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Angela was born on April 15, 1975, in the bustling town of Dodge City, Kansas. She grew up as a beloved member of a large family with 10 children. Known for her wit, intelligence, and her ability to engage in captivating conversations, Angela was always the heart of any gathering. Her love for animals, despite her allergies, was evident throughout her life, and she also had a deep passion for reading and woodworking. As a student of interior design, Angela found beauty in creating and arranging living spaces. However, her most important priority was always her family. She maintained strong relationships with her siblings and was quick to offer a helping hand to friends and even strangers. Angela's passion for genealogy led her to become a family history consultant, where she helped people reconnect with distant relatives. She was also highly active in her church, serving as a choir director, teacher, and youth group leader. On December 18, 1999, Angela married James Craig, a man with dreams of becoming a doctor. In 2006, those dreams became a reality when James earned his doctorate in dental surgery from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. While at the university, James played a key role in establishing the International Dental Program, assisting foreign-born dentists in obtaining their licenses in the United States. By October 2006, James began practicing in Aurora, Colorado. And over the span of 23 years, Angela and James welcomed 6 children into their family. Despite the physical distance, Angela remained close with her siblings, especially her sister, Toni, who lived in Utah. The two spoke on the phone daily and made time for many memorable trips together. With James's dental practice and Angela's deep involvement in the local community, the Craig family seemed happy and content. However, life took an unexpected turn on March 15, 2023 at 11 a.m. when Angela was rushed to the hospital suffering from a debilitating headache, dizziness, and nausea. James was by her side, providing support during the frightening ordeal. Despite the medical team's efforts, Angela's condition worsened by 2 p.m. when she suffered a severe seizure. Doctors acted quickly, placing her on life support as her concerned family sought answers. This was Angela's 3rd hospital visit in just 10 days, with recurring symptoms of headache, nausea, and dizziness. Yet no clear cause had been identified. This time, however, her condition was far more serious, leaving the medical team puzzled. As Angela's condition deteriorated, 2 close friends, Ryan Redfern and his wife, arrived at the hospital. Ryan, a fellow dentist and James's longtime friend from their university days, was also a financial partner in James's dental practice. In 2021, when James faced financial challenges, Ryan stepped in to help save the practice. His wife, who held a doctorate in nursing, was aware of Angela's recent health struggles and wanted to offer support. Angela's symptoms had first appeared on March 5, 2023, after returning from a visit to her sister in Utah. Feeling unwell, she sought medical attention on March 6th, but the doctors found nothing alarming, prescribing her standard medication and recommending rest. However, Angela's condition worsened, leading to another hospital visit on March 9th, raising concern among her friends. On March 9th, while Angela was hospitalized, Ryan's wife reached out to James, offering her help. James, though appreciative, assured her that they had things under control at the moment. The next day, March 10th, Ryan's wife followed up, checking in to see if there had been any progress in Angela's diagnosis and offering her assistance again. James, grateful for her concern, acknowledged how challenging the situation had been, marking the beginning of a critical chapter in Angela's health journey. James expressed his growing concern as the doctors had conducted numerous tests, including several blood draws. Thankfully, the regular blood tests came back normal, ruling out autoimmune disorders and diabetes. The main issue at the time seemed to be Angela's blood pressure. Over the course of 24 hours, she had been given 5 liters of 4 fluids, but her blood pressure remained alarmingly low. Despite the medical interventions, Angela still felt quite unwell. The doctors decided to keep her in the hospital for another night, hoping that she could return home the following day. Over the next few days, Ryan's wife continued to check in on Angela's health, offering unwavering support. James shared that additional tests had been run, including an MRI due to a family history of brain tumors, as well as ultrasounds and CT scans of her head, chest, and abdomen. Surprisingly, all these tests came back normal, and there didn't seem to be any medical explanation for her declining health. Without clear answers, Angela was eventually allowed to go home. But a troubling question remained. If all the medical reports showed Angela was perfectly healthy, why was her condition deteriorating by the day? Unfortunately, on March 15, 2023, Angela's health took a sharp turn for the worse. This time, her symptoms were even more severe. She was struggling with extreme dizziness, nausea, and severe stomach pain. Unable to reach James, who was at his clinic, Angela called her brother for help. He rushed her to the hospital where she was admitted around 11 a.m. Upon receiving the alarming news, James hurried to be by his wife's side. In the midst of this crisis, James contacted his partner's wife to share the distressing update and even sent her 2 photos of Angela in the hospital room. Surrounded by medical professionals, Angela suffered a stroke and became unresponsive. Deeply concerned, Ryan and his wife decided to visit the hospital. They sent James a message to let him know they were on their way to offer support during this uncertain time. While en route to the hospital, Ryan received a troubling call from Caitlin, a relatively new office manager at the place where James worked. Caitlin had noticed some odd occurrences that raised questions about Angela's health. She shared an incident that took place on March 6, 2023. Caitlin had been working late at the dental office when James unexpectedly showed up, despite not having any patients scheduled. What struck Caitlin as odd was that instead of heading to his own office, James went down the hall to use a computer in one of the exam rooms. This was unusual because James typically used his own computer in his office, and this deviation from his normal routine seemed strange. About 30 minutes after Caitlin left the office, she received a text message from James. In the message, James mentioned that he was expecting a personal package to be delivered to the office and asked Caitlin to ensure it was received. He emphasized that no one else should open it. On March 13, 2023, the package James had mentioned finally arrived. However, when Caitlin went to pick it up, she discovered that a colleague had already opened it. Remembering James's request for confidentiality, Caitlin resealed the package and handed it directly to James. While repackaging it, something unusual caught her eye: a hazardous material label. The label was affixed to a cylindrical container marked with the words potassium cyanide. Caitlin assumed the chemical might have some medical or dental use she wasn't familiar with, so she resealed the box and quickly gave it to James. Later that day, she noticed James leaving the office, clutching the cylindrical container wrapped in brown paper. Her suspicions deepened. Why was James taking potassium cyanide home? Curious, Caitlin turned to Google to investigate the uses of potassium cyanide. That's when she stumbled upon a shocking discovery. The symptoms of potassium cyanide poisoning closely resembled those Angela had been experiencing. As Angela's condition worsened, with symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and low blood pressure, Ryan arrived at the hospital, still in shock from what Caitlin had told him. He met up with his wife, and together they went to see Angela, who was now on life support. Without wasting any time, Ryan approached one of the nurses on duty, sharing his suspicion that Angela might have been poisoned by James with potassium cyanide. Though taken aback by the unexpected information, the nurse took the claim seriously and agreed to conduct a new round of tests on Angela. Aware of the gravity of the situation, the nurse also dialed 911 to alert the authorities. Meanwhile, James stepped outside to take a phone call, giving Ryan and his wife an opportunity to leave the hospital. However, their departure was interrupted by a frantic call from James, demanding to know why they had left and informing them that the hospital staff suspected he had poisoned his wife. Ryan didn't hold back. He was upfront with James, confronting him about the mysterious package delivered to the dental office and the unsettling contents. He directly asked James why he had ordered potassium cyanide. Backed into a corner, James finally admitted that he had indeed purchased the chemical, but he claimed that Angela had asked him to do so, never imagining she would use it. After the tense phone call, James texted Ryan, pleading with him not to share their conversation with anyone, especially the police. He expressed concern that Ryan's involvement would only harm his family further. James acknowledged Ryan's motivations, but insisted that if Ryan had come to him directly, man to man, rather than involving others, they might have avoided the current chaos. His frustration and anger toward Ryan were palpable. Ryan, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Angela's deteriorating health. He made a crucial decision and contacted the police, sharing everything he knew, and urging them to investigate further. Later that night, well past midnight, the police arrived at the hospital to discuss Angela's dire condition. She remained on life support with no brain activity. The next day, on March 16, 2023, investigators visited Caitlin, the office manager. That's when the truth began to unravel. Caitlin revealed that on the morning of March 6, 2023, before Angela's first hospital visit, James had prepared a pre-workout protein shake for her. He proudly mentioned it at the office, portraying himself as a caring husband. However, things took a sinister turn when Angela suddenly became dizzy, and from that moment on, her health rapidly declined. Caitlin didn't hold back, also discussing the suspicious package and her concerns about the potassium cyanide. She explained how this lethal chemical could produce the same symptoms Angela had been experiencing, and in some cases could be fatal. Ryan, who had joined the conversation at the dental clinic, added more to the story, shattering the image of the seemingly happy Craig family. He disclosed that in 2021, when James was facing financial troubles and the threat of bankruptcy, he had confided in Ryan about his marital problems. Shockingly, at that time, James had been contemplating divorce. Even more heartbreaking was James's later admission that Angela had contemplated ending her life in 2022 through an overdose, but James had intervened to save her. According to Ryan, James claimed that Angela's self-harming tendencies became more pronounced when he asked for a divorce in December 2022. Despite these serious issues, James never reported any of Angela's behavior to the authorities or sought professional help for her mental health. This pattern of secrecy and neglect raised serious questions about recent events. To get a clearer picture of Angela's mental state, the police interviewed the couple's 6 children. Surprisingly, they painted a different picture, describing their mother as happy and full of energy, with no signs of the troubling behavior James had mentioned. This contradiction only deepened the mystery and suggested that James might have been fabricating a story to explain Angela's worsening health. As suspicion mounted against James, the police launched a full investigation. They obtained search warrants for both the Craig residence and James's dental office. They also began reviewing James's phone records and text conversations with Angela, dating back to March 6, 2023, the day she first reported feeling unwell. The text messages from that day revealed a disturbing exchange. Angela expressed her appreciation for a coffee James had made for her, showing affection and optimism for the day. However, soon after, she mentioned feeling dizzy and off, prompting James to suggest she check her blood pressure. The conversation took a troubling turn when James referenced heavy medications and acknowledged his past concerns, hinting at a possible trigger for Angela. He voiced concern about her symptoms, comparing them to those of a stroke, and asked about any weakness she might have been experiencing. This unsettling exchange, combined with the other evidence, left investigators with more questions than answers. Following the unsettling exchange between James and Angela, where he continued asking about her symptoms and offering suggestions, a troubling level of awareness and concern over her condition became apparent. The investigation took a significant turn when the police decided to inspect James' computer. They uncovered 2 email accounts linked to him, along with a disturbing search history related to Angela's declining health, raising more suspicions about his involvement. In February, just a month before Angela was hospitalized, James had searched terms like, "How many grams of pure arsenic does it take to kill a human? And can arsenic be detected in an autopsy?" He had also looked up chemical suppliers in the city, all of which raised red flags during the investigation. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a purchase made by James on Amazon for a product labeled as 99.999% crystalline metalloid arsenic. The product description explicitly stated that ingesting this chemical could be fatal. Further probing into James' online activity revealed alarming YouTube videos he had watched. One video titled, "5 Undetectable Poisons That Don't Show Signs of Murder," provided instructions on how to create plant-based poisons. He also conducted 3 more searches related to homemade poison making, specifically from plants. As if that weren't disturbing enough, the investigators found another video detailing the effects of cyanide and arsenic poisoning, highlighting how difficult it is for doctors to detect these substances. The most incriminating piece of evidence came in the form of an order James placed for potassium cyanide. At this point, the puzzle pieces were coming together. It was becoming clear that James had been poisoning Angela all along. But why would someone poison his wife and the mother of his children? Was it related to his desire for a divorce? As investigators dug deeper, they interviewed friends and family members. Angela's sister provided critical insight. She revealed that only those closest to Angela knew the truth about her marriage with James, which was far from the loving facade they presented to the world. She disclosed that James had a history of extramarital affairs with multiple women. Even more shocking, James had confessed to Angela about his addiction to inappropriate online material since his teenage years. One particularly disturbing incident from 5 or 6 years earlier caught the attention of the police. The woman recalled Angela telling her that she feared James had deliberately drugged her. Angela suspected that James had drugged her in order to prevent her from intervening in his activities, shedding light on some of the strange text messages between the couple. However, police remained skeptical of James' explanation about drugging Angela, finding it unreasonable that he would resort to such extreme measures. She also shared that Angela had longed to escape her marriage, a sentiment she had expressed repeatedly over the past 16 years. Yet, every time Angela gathered the courage to leave, James would skillfully manipulate her into staying. Their marital issues extended beyond their personal relationship and into James' struggling dental practice. Further complicating the situation, James had tried his luck gambling in Las Vegas, losing over $2,000 despite being in $2 million of debt. To the police, it became clear that beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, the Craig household was rife with turmoil. The investigation uncovered even more damning evidence when they found emails detailing round-trip flights from 2 separate occasions. These tickets were reserved for Karen, an orthodontist based in Texas. The emails between Karen and James were far from professional. Their tone was intimate. Karen had filed for divorce in 2022 and had been in a relationship with James, something Angela knew nothing about. Digging deeper, investigators found that these flights were purchased on the same day arsenic was delivered to James' home. This suggested a calculated plan for James to be with Karen on March 16th. One of Karen's emails to James with the subject line, "See you soon," expressed her regret over the events happening in James's life that week. She apologized for not being a part of his world and for keeping her distance. As police gathered more evidence against James, hospital staff fought to save Angela. Tragically, on March 18th at 4:29 p.m., Angela was declared brain dead. She passed away without ever knowing the truth about what her husband had been plotting. Just hours after Angela was removed from life support, James was officially charged with first-degree premeditated murder. He didn't have much time to reflect on the charges because on March 19th, he was arrested. A few days later, James found himself in a Colorado courtroom for his initial appearance. As the charges against him were read aloud, a mix of friends, family, and even some of James and Angela's children watched in shock. The disheveled 45-year-old man in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, was a far cry from the smiling blonde man seen in family photos. James Craig, already facing the grave charge of first-degree murder, was also hit with a second charge, tampering with physical evidence. The judge set James' bail at a staggering $10 million. His trial is set for December 2024. A week after Angela's death, new information emerged, revealing that she had not one, but 3 life insurance policies in her name. While it's not confirmed, this raised the chilling possibility that collecting those life insurance payouts might have been part of James' grim plan, along with his affair. Now, Angela's 6 children are left to grapple with the devastating reality of losing their mother while their father stands trial for her murder. Angela's children were her pride and joy, and following James' arrest, Angela's family stepped in to care for them. They made it clear that James's extended family should not be held responsible for his terrible actions. In Angela's obituary, her family and loved ones tried to capture the essence of her life beyond the tragedy of her untimely death. When Angela was declared brain dead, her family made the brave decision to donate her organs. While they couldn't save her, they found bittersweet comfort in knowing that her legacy lives on through the lives she helped save. Case of Manjit Panghali. In every person's life, 2 decisions hold utmost significance: their career path and the choice of a life partner. Securing one's desired career alongside a caring and affectionate life companion can make life feel like a flawless masterpiece. Manjit Panghali, a resident of Vancouver, Canada, had a life that seemed to embody this ideal. But the tragic conclusion of her beautiful existence left an indelible mark on the entire nation of Canada. October 18, 2006 marked the date when the news of Manjit Panghali's disappearance emerged. However, just 5 days later, on October 23rd, her charred body was discovered on a beach shore. After this discovery, the police promptly reached the crime scene and informed Manjit's in-laws about the incident. The news quickly spread across the city of Vancouver that a partially burnt body of a woman had been found on the beach. Manjit's family was unable to comprehend why someone would commit such an act against her, as Manjit was known to be a person who always greeted everyone with a friendly smile. However, after months of investigation, the real killer of Manjit was identified, which surprised Manjit's family a lot. But in the end, to know how Manjit disappeared, who killed her, and how the killer killed Manjit, we will also need to know a little about Manjit's background. Manjit was a Canadian resident of Indian origin, residing in Vancouver, British Columbia, with her husband Muktir Panghali and their 3-year-old daughter Maya. Manjit's family had come to Canada in search of a better life and settled in Vancouver. They had worked hard to provide their family and children with every possible happiness. Manjit had a happy childhood. Like any young woman, she also had dreams. She had decided long ago that she wanted to become a teacher. Manjit pursued her education to become a teacher at the university. And it was during this time that she met Muktir. Muktir's family also hailed from India, and he had come to Canada to pursue his career in the teaching field. According to Manjit, Muktir was a cheerful person just like her, which gradually made Manjit start liking him. Their meeting at the university gradually developed into feelings of love. After dating for a while, they eventually decided to get married. When both families found out that they both wanted to get married, they were quite happy. Mukhtir's family trusted that Mukhtir is a good and responsible guy who will always keep their daughter happy. Additionally, Mukhtir's family also liked Manjit as a good girl. Following this, Manjit and Mukhtir got married in 1997. In the eyes of both families, they were a perfect happy couple who were quite friendly and cheerful. However, just a few years later, when Mukhtir's true nature was revealed, Manjit faced difficulties in her married life. Mukhtir belonged to a conservative family, and his thinking was somewhat similar. According to him, Manjit should serve him, and when Mukhtir returned home from work, there should be delicious food ready on his table. But now, Manjit was quite troubled by Mukhtir's behavior. She was a woman of strong determination and hard work. She had never imagined Mukhtir's mindset would be like this. When Manjit told her sisters and friends about the difficulties in her married life, everyone told her that these are just the initial days of her relationship. There are always some differences or arguments between every new married couple. She just needs to be a little patient. After this, along with Manjit, her sister and Manjit's friends also forgot about this matter. Just as Manjit had planned the rest of her life, she had also planned her pregnancy in a similar way. Now, she wanted to become a mother. As a result, 6 years after getting married, her dream also came true in 2003. Manjit gave birth to a daughter whom she named Maya. Manjit was quite happy, and Mukhtir was also very happy. Now Mukhtir spent most of his time with Maya. Mukhtir loved his daughter very much. Because of this, everyone began to feel that perhaps whatever difficulties were coming in Manjit's married life, they had all ended. But this was not true. After Maya's birth, Mukhtir started drinking even more. Whenever he drank, he would stay out of the house until late at night, and when he came home, he expected his wife to have cooked dinner and be waiting for him. But Manjit, who wanted care and support after pregnancy, was quite broken by her husband's behavior. Because of this, Manjit slipped into depression, and the dreams she had once had were now shattering in front of her eyes. Now she understood how big a mistake she had made in understanding Mukhtir, and she was not sure what to do to set her health and future in the right direction. During this time, Manjit does not take any major action and remains patiently at Mukhtir's house for 3 years. However, in 2006, Manjit plans to have a second child, hoping to bring happiness back into the household. Nonetheless, due to constant arguments, she begins to feel that this may no longer be possible. Shortly after, Manjit becomes pregnant again, and Mukhtir is quite pleased upon learning this news. Unexpectedly, Maddie's behavior changes significantly. He starts to love and care for Manjit as he had before, which makes Manjit very happy as she feels she has regained his lost love. However, she does not realize that this happiness will be short-lived. On October 18, 2006, Manjit had left for her prenatal yoga class, but a significant amount of time passed and she did not return home. The next day, Mukhtir called Manjit's family and informed them that she hadn't come home since the previous evening. Upon hearing this, Manjit's family became somewhat worried. They then called Manjit's sister, Jasmine, and narrated the whole story. Jasmine also called all of Manjit's friends, but Manjit hadn't gone to any of their houses. In fact, whenever there was an argument between Mukhtir and Manjit, Manjit often left with her daughter without informing anyone. Sometimes going to a hotel or a friend's house, everyone thought that the same thing had happened again this time, and Manjit would return home shortly. However, this time, Manjit's daughter Maya was at home, and this worried everyone a lot, because Manjit loved her daughter very much and never left her alone anywhere. It had been a whole day since Manjit had gone missing, so everyone began to suspect that something unfortunate might have happened to her. Therefore, her husband, Mukhtir, filed a missing person complaint at a nearby police station on the night of October 19th. Apart from this, Mukhtir also called all the acquaintances to inquire about Manjit, but no one had seen her. By now, the news had spread in the media that a married woman named Manjit Panghali had been missing for a few days, and Mukhtir Manjit's husband appealed for her safety and return. During the police investigation, the phone calls of all household members were traced, but the police did not find any significant information. Here too, the date was now October 23, 2006, and Manjit had been missing for 5 days. Manjit's husband and family members became worried when the police informed them that a charred body had been found on the shore of a place called South Delta, and they were asked to come and identify it. When Manjit's family members went there to see, they found that the body was indeed Manjit's. Manjit's body was sent for a post-mortem examination, and the report revealed that she was pregnant with a female fetus at the time of her death. This news deeply distressed Manjit's family, who were left to wonder what wrongdoing their daughter had committed that led to her being brutally murdered by being set on fire. From a logical perspective, Manjit's killer not only took her life, but also the life of the child she was carrying in her womb. The post-mortem report also reveals that Manjit's death was not caused by burning, but rather the killer first strangled Manjit, and then, when she had stopped breathing, attempted to burn her body. During the investigation, the police also found Manjit's car parked at a distance from her dead body. Forensic examination of the car revealed no signs of forced entry or any marks of struggle inside the car. Subsequently, the police first checked Manjit's background, but didn't find any suspects who had enmity with Manjit. Due to this reason, the police suspected that perhaps the killer was someone who knows Manjit well. Hence, the police's direct suspicion falls on Manjit's family members. The police first thought of questioning Manjit's husband Mukhtar. During the interrogation, Mukhtar stated that Manjit has been in regular contact with her college friend Tony for the past year, and they sometimes went to dinner together. After Mukhtar's statement, the police now doubted Tony, and then they searched for and interrogated Tony as well. However, upon talking to Tony, police found out that Tony didn't have any relationship with Manjit as Mukhtar had claimed. Tony and Manjit were just good friends, and this fact was confirmed when Tony answered all questions correctly in the lie detector test. Now the police had to determine why Mukhtar had lied to them. Therefore, the interrogation with Mukhtar resumed. During this interrogation, the police discovered that there was an individual from the families of Manjit and Mukhtar, who was quite close to both of them. In fact, that person's name was Sukenda, and he was Mukhtar's younger brother. Sukenda Panghali used to live in the basement of Manjit and Mukhtar's house. However, at Manjit's insistence, Mukhtar had kicked Sukenda out of the house. Sukenda was the one who used to persuade Mukhtar to party until late at night and then drink with him. It was because of Sukenda's influence that Mukhtar's habit of drinking alcohol had increased even more. Manjit noticed how Sukenda's presence was negatively impacting her life, so she gave her husband Mukhtar an ultimatum: either Sukenda stays or she stays in this house. Mukhtar faced a difficult choice between supporting his brother or his wife. He decided to ask Sukenda to leave and remain with Manjit. After investigating the incident, the police initially suspected Sukenda, but could not find any evidence against him. Sukenda was able to prove that he was with his friends on the night Manjit disappeared. As a result, the police cleared Sukenda of any wrongdoing. However, they later detained Mukhtar again for further questioning. By now, the police had determined that the relationship between Manjit and Mukhtar had begun to deteriorate just a few months after their marriage. Whenever Manjit discovered Mukhtar's daily habit of drinking alcohol, she scolded him. On the other hand, Manjit had hurt Mukhtar's brother Sukenda by throwing him out of the house, which had wounded Mukhtar's ego and masculinity, causing him to harbor even more resentment towards Manjit. However, despite this, there was no solid evidence to make Mukhtar the prime suspect in Manjit's murder case. Moreover, Manjit's family and friends also had substantial trust in him. But now the police have decided to re-examine all the evidence. First, the police noticed that the driver's seat of the car was pushed back, which indicated that Manjit had not driven the car there by herself. Rather, there was someone else with her in the car at the time. Secondly, Mukhtar had mentioned the location of Manjit's prenatal classes in his statement, and the car was parked near that area. However, during the investigation, it was found that there were no prenatal yoga classes in that area, and the actual location where Manjit used to attend her prenatal classes was approximately 15 miles away from the location provided by Mukhtar. Consequently, Mukhtar's lie was caught. In simple words, Mukhtar told the police that Manjit's prenatal yoga class location was where her dead body was found, but in reality, Manjit's prenatal classes were far away from that place. After that, the police tracked Mukhtar's phone's location and call records. Here, The police discovered that Mukhtar had Manjit's cell phone, in which he had inserted his own SIM and was using it. This revealed to the police that on the evening of October 18th, Manjit had visited Mukhtar's house. Therefore, Mukhtar had Manjit's cell phone. By now, all the statements given by Mukhtar were proving to be false. Then, the police got solid evidence in their hands. They obtained CCTV footage from a gas station near Manjit's house, in which Mukhtar was seen buying an old newspaper and a lighter from that gas station. Although Mukhtar used to drink alcohol, he did not smoke cigarettes. So why would he buy a lighter and an old newspaper? Here, Mukhtar became a prime suspect in the eyes of the police. So the police took immediate action. Nearly 6 months later, on March 12, 2006, Mukhtar was arrested in his wife Manjit's murder case. The police interrogated Mukhtar rigorously. At first, he completely denied the claim of murdering Manjit, portraying himself as innocent. But then, after some time, his courage broke, and he confessed to his crime. Now the culprit was caught. When Mukhtar explained why he had mercilessly killed his pregnant wife on October 18th, the police was shaken to the core. Mukhtar explained that after Manjit's yoga class, he took her home, where an argument broke out between them. The argument escalated to the point that, in a fit of rage, Mukhtar strangled Manjit, killing her. He then took her body to a secluded seaside location in South Delta and burned it, in an attempt to destroy any evidence that could be used by the police. In addition, Mukhtar provided the reason behind wanting to kill Manjit. Essentially, Mukhtar had developed hatred towards Manjit. Mukhtar's mind was filled with intense dislike and negativity towards Manjit, which became the cause of Manjit's death. Hearing this, both Manjit's and Mukhtar's families and friends were greatly surprised. Subsequently, in November 2010, Mukhtar was found guilty in the Manjit murder case, and he was also charged with second-degree murder. It was a shocking murder that sent shockwaves across the province. Former schoolteacher Manjit Panghali strangled his pregnant wife and then burned her body. Immediately after Mukhtar's arrest, both Manjit's and Mukhtar's families fought a case in court for the full custody of Mukhtar's 3-year-old daughter Maya. However, in the end, Maya's full custody was awarded to Manjit's sister, Jasmine Bambra. Then, in February 2011, Mukhtar was sentenced to life imprisonment. Crown Prosecutor Dennis Murray narrated the incident in the following manner. Immediately after the verdict of the Manjit murder case, Mukhtar killed Manjit immediately after she returned from prenatal yoga classes. Then he took her body to a secluded coastal area in South Delta in Manjit's own car and set it on fire. He delayed filing a missing complaint as much as possible. In December 2010, the Canadian police publicly disclosed Manjit's diary and letters. After this, several media houses extensively scrutinized these letters, revealing that Manjit was clinically depressed. However, she was making a lot of effort to save her married life. During discussions with media houses, a member of Manjit's family revealed that she had been struggling with depression since her first pregnancy. Mukhtar not only killed Manjit but also took 2 lives. She was so happy to be pregnant. It was something that she had wanted for a long time. So with that, the Manjit Panghali murder case comes to an end. On July 17, 1982, a woman's body was found by hikers. She was found slumped over a log as if she had been tying her shoe when her attacker shot her twice in the head. She had been sexually assaulted and the bullet holes had been covered with men's underwear. The coroner estimated that she had been dead less than 24 hours before she was found. The victim wore white and yellow shoes, a sleeveless blue shirt, Lee brand jeans with a blue bikini bottom in the pocket, and a blue swimsuit underneath. When discovered, there were 2 sets of footprints leading to the scene from the parking area. One set returned to where a vehicle was parked and continued onto the freeway. At her autopsy, a vaccination scar was located on her left arm and another on her abdomen, possibly from a C-section. They also determined her last meal to be a salad and were able to collect semen from her body. Investigators were able to determine the t-shirt she was wearing was only sold on the West Coast, and so she was either a tourist from out of town or she resided there. She was buried at our Mother of Sorrows Catholic Cemetery in Reno, Nevada, and became known as the Sheep Flats Jane Doe due to being found in the area known as Sheep Flats. In February 2018, a Washoe County forensic investigator went to a lecture on forensic genealogy by Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick. They were hoping that forensic genealogy could help solve this case, and so they contracted the DNA Doe Project and Identifiers International to assist in identifying Sheep Flat's Jane Doe and her killer. In May of 2019, her identity was finally confirmed as Mary Edith Silvani. Mary was born in Pontiac, Michigan on September 29, 1948 to John and Blanche Silvani, and grew up in Detroit. She was the only daughter and had two brothers, Bob and Charles, both of whom are now deceased. She had lived a very difficult life. Her mother had left her when she was a child and spent much of her life in mental institutions. When she was 16 years old, her father died, leaving her family homeless. And when she died in 1980, she was sadly estranged from her family. Nancy Cumming, a friend of hers during high school, published several photos of her when she was 19 and when she was her bridesmaid. Another classmate, Paula Headley, said Mary had an affinity for art and reading, visited the Detroit Institute of Arts frequently, was quiet and kind-hearted, and never talked about her family. The 1966 McKinsey High School yearbook has a photo of her, but the school has no record of her graduating, and she did not have a senior photo taken. When she was 24, she had a child who she gave up for adoption around 1972. She then moved to California with her brother Charles, who died by suicide 3 months after Mary was killed, and was also considered a John Doe for a brief period. According to family and the LA Times, Charles Silvani was wanted for the fatal shooting of a popular Fresno bar owner in 1972 and killed himself a decade later by jumping off an 11-story building in San Diego. He allegedly was the accomplice in the fatal bar shooting and was later charged and convicted. Mary's other brother, Robert Silvani Sr., stayed in Detroit when Mary and Charles moved to California. He married and had a son, but over the years, he also became estranged from his family, left Michigan, later moved to California, and died in Oregon. His son, Robert Silvani Jr., was 4 when his father left him. He is now in his 50s and says he recently learned a family he never knew of through Mary's death. What Mary did between the years of 1974 to 1982 is unknown. She slowly drifted away from her siblings, and they eventually fell out of contact with one another. She was never reported missing by anyone, and investigators have been unable to locate anyone who knew her at the time. Mary's closest living relative is believed to be her nephew, Robert Silvani Jr., who never met her. He learned about his aunt's death in 2018, when DNA researchers reached out to him via Facebook and told him that they had linked him to a relative of a homicide victim and that they needed his DNA. After finding out that Mary had ties to the New York area, her criminal record was pulled up by the Detroit Police Department. It was discovered that she had been arrested for loitering when she was 25 years old and that her fingerprints were still stored in archives. Eventually, Mary's killer was identified as serial killer James Richard Curry through DNA. His children voluntarily agreed to provide DNA samples and worked with investigators to solve the cold case. This is the first known case of victim and killer both being identified using forensic genetic genealogy techniques. Curry was arrested in January 1983 as a suspect in another murder just 5 months after Mary's murder. He confessed to shooting his former business associates Gerald Novoslatz and his wife Sharon, and also admitted to the shooting of Richard Lemon the year prior, whose body he had kept in his storage unit. Committed suicide by hanging in the Santa Clara County, California jail a day after his arrest, and is a suspect in a 4th murder. Authorities still don't know whether Mary and her killer knew each other, how she wound up near that Nevada hiking trail that day, or where she was headed. Coincidentally, Mary's mother's maiden name was Curry, the same last name as her killer. After 37 years, Mary finally got her name back, and as of May 2019, Mary's case is considered closed. Christy Mirack was born November 3, 1967 to Vincent and Jerry. In 1992, she was 25 years old and a beloved schoolteacher at Rarstown Elementary School in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She was living with a roommate in the Greenfield Estates townhouse in East Lampada Township. On December 21, 1992, when she didn't show up to teach her 6th grade class, Her boss immediately knew something was wrong. He hopped in his car and headed to her apartment, hoping he would spot her changing a flat tire on the side of the road. Sadly, he found her door ajar and stepped in and found her dead shortly after 9 a.m. She had been raped, beaten, and strangled to death. She was wearing a coat and gloves, which led police to believe she had been getting ready for work. They found a wooden cutting board next to her body, which they believed someone had used to violently attack her. Previously published reports noted that a neighbor had heard a single scream at 7:15 a.m. Police were also struck by the sheer brazenness of the crime, which had occurred during the daylight hours within a 45-minute window between when her roommate left for work at 7 a.m. and when she usually left for work around 7:45 a.m. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had been watching her or was someone who knew her schedule, according to a 1995 Lancaster New Era story. Citing police, neighbors saw a car pull into a lot directly across from Christy's home shortly after her roommate left for work at 7 a.m. A man jumped out of the car and headed towards her door. Police theorized at the time that Christy either knew the man or opened the door expecting to see someone else. That's when he forced his way inside and no one ever saw him leave. Witnesses described the vehicle as a 1984 to 1991 Dodge Daytona or Turismo hatchback. It was faded silver, dull gray, or faded white in color. Police described the man as white, in his 20s, tall with an athletic build, and sandy blonde or light brown hair, possibly in a crew cut. Police interviewed over 1,600 people over the years, all leading to dead ends. They also looked into her past and checked out every lead, but nothing led them to her killer. Police gathered DNA evidence from her body and from the crime scene, but it didn't turn up any matches when they entered it into the FBI's National DNA Database. Another dead end. Eventually, the case went cold. In 2015, 23 years after her violent death, the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office took over the cold case. Christine Wilson, a Lancaster County prosecutor, began poring over the case files, often spending her nights and weekends reading and rereading thousands of pages of reports. In 2017, after years of dead ends and disappointment, investigators learned of the new DNA technique called genetic genealogy and began working with Parabon Nanolabs. They uploaded DNA left at the crime scene by the killer to GeneMatch, a public website where people can share their DNA profiles to find relatives. This produced the names of several distant relatives, including a half-sister who had uploaded her DNA to GeneMatch. They then created a sketch of her likely perpetrator and began building a family tree and eventually zeroed in on a suspect. 49-year-old Raymond Charles Rowe, a disc jockey who went by the name DJ Freeze. No one knew how or if Rowe and Christy knew each other, but the two often visited the same social clubs. Coincidentally, Rowe's route to work took him right past Christy's apartment complex. He also drove a white Toyota Celica in 1992, which matched the vehicle that witnesses saw parked in odd places at the complex on the morning of the murder. At the time of the murder, Rowe was 24 years old and lived on East Chestnut Street, 4 miles from Christie's townhouse. Lancaster County investigators began following Rowe, who was living at 249 Whittier Lane in Lancaster and surveilling his home 24/7. They learned that his next DJing gig would be on May 31, 2018 at the Smoketown Elementary School. This is where they recovered used chewing gum and a water bottle he had used while working in an event as a disc jockey at the school. They used these items to compare his DNA to the DNA found at the crime scene on her body and on the carpet underneath her body, and it was a perfect match. In June 2018, they arrested him for Christy's murder. In January 2019, he pleaded guilty to her rape and murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When he entered his guilty plea, he never explained why he murdered her. On August 26, 2021, he requested a new trial claiming he was actually innocent. He claimed he lied during his original guilty plea and that he and she had a sexual relationship and were intimate on the day of her murder, but that someone else killed her. He criticized his attorneys, stating that they kept urging him to plead guilty. He said the conditions in the Lancaster County prison and their coercion eventually wore him down, and he was largely kept in isolation, sometimes with no clothes and only a blanket. He said he lost 25 pounds and had diarrhea every day. He now remains in prison at the Waymark Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. the case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae Brooke Edwards was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia. Shanae grew up with her parents and older brother Tyson. Although her early life and upbringing are not well documented, her loved ones remembered her as an adventure seeker who loved nature, hiking, motorcycling, and animals. She was a kind-hearted, genuine person who formed deep, sincere connections with others, showing generosity, patience, love, and kindness to everyone she met. In 2019, Shanae traveled to Georgia, a country that had long fascinated her with its natural beauty, rich history, and landmarks. Her boyfriend, Moriel Syed, a Lebanese national, had planned to join her in Georgia, but was unable to do so because the country's borders were closed to unvaccinated individuals at the time. Shanae resided in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This allowed her to support herself financially while exploring the country and visiting new destinations. She formed close bonds with like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, Shanae uploaded a photo to her social media profile, captioning it with the single word, joy. The image was taken during a scenic motorcycle ride, an activity she thoroughly enjoyed. The following day, July 30th, 2021, Shanae decided to hike up Mutit, a popular tourist attraction situated in the heart of Tbilisi. According to her friends, Shanae would often take leisurely strolls in the wooded area near the mountain, and she had never encountered any issues or threats to her personal safety. On July 30th, 2021, Shanae left her residence around 3:30 p.m. and was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavare, located at the foot of Mount Mutit, which serves as a starting point for hikers. Shanae was scheduled to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city, but she failed to appear. When attempts to reach her by phone proved unsuccessful, her friends decided to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. Meanwhile, a friend of Shanae's living in California grew concerned and placed a call to Shanae's phone. When the call was answered, Shanae could be heard screaming, "Please let me go. Okay, just let me go," indicating that she was being attacked and desperately seeking release. The call was abruptly disconnected, and when Shanae's friend tried to call back, there was no answer. There are conflicting accounts of what Shanae's friend in California did next. According to some reports, she posted an urgent message to a Facebook group comprised of expats living in Georgia, asking someone to alert the police to the disturbing phone call. Other sources claim that Shanae's friend directly contacted the Georgian police and relayed the distressing details. It is certain that within hours of Shanae making a frightening phone call, Georgian police became aware of it and began to investigate. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers were deployed to search the area, focusing on the slopes of Mount Mutit. The search party utilized search dogs and drones, but Shanae remained missing. By sunset, her phone was still off, and she had not visited any local hospitals. This lack of progress was ominous, as was confirmed the following day. Tragically, on July 31st, after an extensive search, 31-year-old Shanae Brooke Edwards was discovered deceased near a hiking trail. The perpetrator attempted to conceal evidence by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was found nearby. Shanae's phone was soon discovered on the mountainside. Further inspection of the crime scene revealed an old rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. Georgia's interior minister revealed to local media that police have uncovered information not yet disclosed to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation. He assured that the ministry and police officers are doing everything possible to find the perpetrator. The forensic examination of Shanae's body revealed 13 stab wounds, with 5 in the neck area, leading the police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill the young woman. Signs of strangulation were also found on her neck. After the authorities officially confirmed Shanae's death, the media reported that the crime was motivated by lust, but the Georgian police denied this, citing the forensic medical examiner's failure to find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Shanae's boyfriend, Moriel Syed, has vowed to track down the culprit, no matter how long it takes, and exact revenge. Shanae's death was a devastating blow to her friends and a particularly traumatic experience for her family, who lived on another continent. They faced the difficult task of transporting her body back home, while the police worked to identify the perpetrator. Although the police are directly responsible for preventing crimes and capturing criminals, in this case, there was an added concern. Georgia's billion-dollar tourism industry could be severely impacted by the fact that tourists, neighbors, and employees and visitors of Manjit Park. They examined the roots of the case and reviewed video footage of Shanae's movements on the day she went missing. In an expat Facebook group, a local woman reported hearing a woman screaming on the trails below Manjit Park around an hour after Shanae left home. Another woman in the same group claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain the day before Shanae went missing, in which a man was seen aggressively assaulting a woman in the same area where the crime eventually took place. At the same time, the laboratory analyzed the crime weapon and discovered a male DNA sample, but no matches were found in the Georgian police database. Consequently, the samples were sent to the databases of 194 Interpol member states for further checking. Witness interviews revealed that Shanae had no enemies, no history of conflict with anyone, and no association with individuals of questionable character, suggesting she may have been a random victim of a crime with an unclear motive. The police conducted a meticulous investigation, collecting genetic samples from several dozen individuals who could potentially have been involved in the crime, and subjected each to rigorous scrutiny. Following a thorough and multifaceted investigation, authorities were able to narrow down the list of suspects until they found a DNA match. 40 days after Shanae Brooke Edwards' death, the Georgia police released a statement announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old man, Rafael Marsokulov, a Georgian citizen born in 1988. The evidence gathered during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance footage, genetic tests, and other proof, led to his arrest on September 8th. Marsokulov's lawyer stated that his client denies all charges, including robbery and the murder of Shanae Brooke Edwards, and has pleaded not guilty. The lawyer claimed that Marsokulov was not involved in the case and has chosen to exercise his right to remain silent. After Marsokulov's identity was made public, his image was broadcast on television. A woman from the Georgian capital took to Facebook to share a post revealing that her friend had been attacked by two men on Mount Manjit a few months prior, and although the police were aware of the perpetrators' identities, the case was closed. She suggested that if the police had done their job properly, the Australian girl might still be alive. Additionally, Marsokulov's own Facebook page revealed that he was an activist for the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court denied Marsokulov's request to be released on bail while awaiting trial, instead keeping him in custody. Police had obtained strong physical evidence, as well as damning testimony from Marsokulov's brother and wife, who revealed that Marsokulov had confessed to the crime at home. He warned them that if they told anyone about his involvement in Shanae Brooke Edwards' attack, their young child would face the same fate. In October 2021, the Edwards family wrote a heartfelt letter describing Shanae's personality and expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported them. They specifically thanked the government of Georgia for its financial assistance in repatriating Shanae's body and the Georgian people for their ongoing love, attention, and support during this difficult and tragic period. In February 2022, the first hearing on the case took place under Georgian law. Marsokulov faced a possible sentence of 16 to 20 years in prison. At the trial, he chose not to remain silent and pleaded guilty to robbery. However, he denied intentionally taking Shanae's life. The prosecutor disagreed, pointing out that the 13 stab wounds, including 5 to the neck, indicated Marsokulov's intent to kill the victim. After his knife broke, he even strangled Shanae. The defense claimed that Marsokulov has mental health issues and was in an abnormal state when the crime occurred. However, a psychological examination found him to be sane, allowing the court to impose a meaningful punishment based on the severity of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Marsokulov's blood tested positive for powerful drugs at the time of his arrest, but this did not diminish his guilt. Marsokulov admitted his guilt and apologized to Shanae Brooke Edwards' family in his final statement. According to the alleged motive, Marsokulov had intended to steal Shanae's iPhone 12, but his plan was foiled when she threw the phone into a ravine. Only 2 people knew what happened that day, and sadly, one of them is no longer alive to tell the tale. The prosecution requested a postponement of the sentencing, as the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to attend the hearing. In a statement, Shanae Brooke Edwards' family urged the Georgian justice system to impose a life imprisonment sentence on Raphael Markelov, citing the tragic and devastating loss of their loved one, who left behind many grieving friends and family members. On March 9, 2022, a trial was held, at which Raphael Markelov was found guilty. Representing the family, Shanae's brother Tyson again requested that the defendant be given a life sentence. Markelov apologized to Tyson Edwards, claiming he was not that kind of person and had simply found himself in this situation. Ultimately, 33-year-old Raphael Markelov was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty allowed under Georgian law. Ronald Henry Tammen Jr. was born July 23, 1933, and went by the nickname Ron. He was brought up by a wealthy and patriotic family in Maple Heights, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. He was a varsity wrestler, a member of the ROTC, played string bass in a jazz band called the Campus Owls, and was described as handsome, smart, and studious. He had plans to become a stockbroker once he earned his business degree. At the age of 19, he lived in a dorm at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and was also the resident hall advisor with a good GPA. The dorm was called Fisher Hall and was a former Victorian mental asylum that had been converted to a dormitory. On April 19, 1953, Ron spent the early evening studying and hanging out with friends. Around 7 p.m., he was seen down the hall in a friend's room, helping him with his homework. About 9 p.m., Ron requested new bed sheets from the hall manager because someone had put a dead fish in his bed. Reports say about 30 minutes later, he apparently heard something outside his room that disturbed him, and he went out into the hallway to investigate, but strangely, he never returned. It is unclear who witnessed him leaving his room and provided this information. Ron's roommate, Chuck Finley, returned to campus from visiting family and came into their room after 10 p.m. and found Ron gone. Chuck had first assumed that Ron was spending the night at his Delta Tau Delta fraternity house and did not report his disappearance until the next day. His clothes, car keys, wallet, ID, bank book, high school classroom, and other personal items were left behind in his dorm room. He also left the lights on, the radio playing, and a psychology textbook lying open on his desk. Curiously, he had actually dropped his psychology course 3 weeks earlier. His gold Chevrolet sedan was not taken from its place in the school parking lot. His bass fiddle was still in the back seat of the car, and he left behind $200 in his bank account. About a week after he disappeared, about 400 students canvassed the area looking for him. Weeks later, his mother reported him missing to the FBI. Authorities have not found any indications of foul play in Ron's disappearance. They theorized that he could have developed amnesia and wandered away, but if that was the case, he should have been found relatively quickly. A couple months after he went missing, a woman living in 7 Mile, Ohio, 12 miles east of the Miami University campus claims that a young man came to her door around midnight the evening Ron disappeared and asked what town he was in. Then he asked directions to the bus stop, which she gave him, and he left. However, the bus line had suspended its midnight run, so he could not have gotten on a bus. The witness says the man she spoke to was disheveled and dirty and appeared upset and confused. He was not wearing a coat or hat, although it was a cold night and there was snow on the ground. She believed he was walking and not in a car. The man matched the physical description of Ron and was wearing similar clothes, but it has not been confirmed that they were the same person. Strangely, 5 months to the day before Ron vanished, he went to the Butler County Coroner's office in Hamilton, Ohio, and asked Dr. Garrett Boone for a test to have his blood typed. The coroner claims that this was the only such request he ever got in his 35 years of practice. When the doctor asked why he wanted the blood test, he stated in case he wanted to give blood someday. Dr. Boone sent him to Mercy Hospital where a blood sample was taken and Ron got his results sent to him at Fisher Hall, which were O positive. It's unknown why Ron didn't just get the test done on campus at the university hospital where it was available. Ron was scheduled for a physical in 2010 and spent 9 years trying to solve it. She doesn't think Ron died around the time of his disappearance and thinks he lived for an extended period, perhaps as long as 42 years, which would place his death sometime in 1995. She bases this conclusion on the fact that the FBI discarded Ron's fingerprint records in 2002. Regulations allow them to destroy fingerprint records 7 years after a person's death. Her belief is that Ron's psychology professor was involved with the CIA and that Ron may have been recruited into the agency. When Fisher Hall was demolished in 1978, authorities combed through the rubble looking for any evidence of Ron but found nothing, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Monica Diane Sanders was born April 15, 1968 to Doris and James Sanders. She was described as a sweet, kind-hearted person that loved children. She graduated from Falk High School and became a fifth-year ballet student. On August 21, 1988, 20-year-old Monica went to a dance club, formerly called The Pines, on Highway 67 in Texarkana, Arkansas, which is now called Electric Cowboy. Her friends were ready to leave before she was, so a man named Johnny offered to give her a ride home so she could stay. She was later seen leaving with 26-year-old Johnny Westbrook, a man that lived only a couple of blocks from her family. Monica had planned a birthday party for her 7-year-old sister, Christy, the very next day, but she never showed up. Concerned, her mother walked over to the neighbor's house where Monica was supposed to have stayed the night. However, Monica was nowhere to be found. They quickly went to police to report her missing, but were frustratedly told that they had to wait 48 hours before making the report. Sadly, 9 days later, her body was found in Mercer Bayou in a wooded area in Texarkana. Investigators say she had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and shot 3 times in the chest, and her teeth had been knocked out. Strangely, her killer neatly folded her clothing and placed them along with her boots next to her body. The man she left the club with that night, Johnny Westbrook, was later arrested and charged with her murder. There were 3 suspected accomplices as well: David Brown, Kendall Payne, and Rick Flippo. One was arrested, but the charges were dropped. The other men were never charged, but all 4 reportedly failed a lie detector test. While interviewing Johnny, police noticed he had 3 scratches on his torso the day after she went missing. They took pictures and questioned him about the scratches, but he gave conflicting stories on how he received them. However, this info was never turned into the jury during his trial for first-degree murder, and Johnny would be acquitted. Her family believes someone out there knows what happened, and they pray that they come forward to give them closure. Because Monica was known for her love of children, the Fox City Park was renamed Monica Sanders Memorial Park. Sadly, it was later vandalized, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. The case of Ada Betty Cuadros Fernandez. Ada Cuadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chamote, Peru, to Victor Cuadros, a veterinarian, and El Fernandez, a teacher. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Ada consistently excelled academically, winning knowledge contests and enjoying a happy childhood. Growing up, Ada spent a lot of time with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, developing a strong connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada's family was middle class, not poor, but not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she sought ways to contribute financially, forming an entertainment group with her sister and a friend to perform at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law. But unfortunately, her family's financial situation made it impossible for her to continue, and she was forced to drop out. Despite this setback, was determined to succeed and support her family. With the goal of building a better life in mind, Ada applied for a U.S. visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and Latin American countries, Ada viewed the United States as a land of unlimited opportunities. She was determined to migrate, work hard, earn a better income, and create a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was overjoyed for her and sold some of their belongings to gather enough money for her journey. Her initial destination was Texas, where she planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, Ada started working as a waitress at a restaurant. Later, she found employment with a company that placed nannies in households, which is how she met the Lazarkikic family. The family consisted of Michael, commonly known as Mike, his wife Renee, and their 3 children, Elisa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background, except that Mike and Renee got married in 2000, and shortly after, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Elisa. For months after Elisa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarkikic couple was searching for a reliable nanny to care for their twins when Renee returned to work. Since Elisa was already settled in a daycare where she attended daily and had made friends, they decided to keep her there. After interviewing several candidates, they found Ada to be the most suitable. At 27, Ada was young yet mature, appearing healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start right away, so she could spend a few weeks showing her the household routines, explaining where everything was and outlining her expectations. This would also give Renee the opportunity to observe how Ada interacted with the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one non-negotiable condition. They required a commitment from Ada to stay with them for at least 18 months, which she agreed to. Initially, the agreement was that Ada would only spend her days at the Lazarkikic household. But later on, they asked her to move in full-time and she accepted. As a result, she only went back to her uncle's house on weekends. Everything seemed to be going well, and the Lazarkikic family was more than satisfied with Ada's work and had grown to trust her completely. They had many happy memories, captured in photos, of Ada smiling and caring for the twins. However, the Lazarkikic family's situation took a dramatic turn in the summer of 2005. Ada broke the news to them that her uncles were returning to Peru and then moving to Germany, and she intended to go with them, having already bought her plane ticket for October 29th. This was a blow to the couple, as it was not what they had originally agreed upon. Eventually, they came to terms with it, and only asked Ada to stay on until they could find a suitable replacement. They even asked for her help in finding and selecting her successor, and Ada agreed to assist them. After Ada stopped sleeping over at the Lazarkikics, she would go back to her uncle's house every night and return early the next morning. With her departure approaching, the Lazarkikics arranged to meet several potential nannies on Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee asked Ada to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children, which Ada did. After feeding the kids, Ada waited for Renee's return. When Renee got back home, she greeted her children, making sure they were doing fine. After conducting some interviews, she spent over an hour with her kids before putting them to bed. Everything appeared normal. However, at exactly 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual since the twins were heavy sleepers who never woke up on their own. Renee got up, went to their room, comforted Kyle until he fell asleep again, and then returned to bed. At 7:30, 2 hours later, Mike entered the children's room, roused them from sleep, gave them a hug and a kiss, and left them in Ada's care before departing for work. Just before 9:30, Renee awoke, spent time with the twins, changed Ryan's diaper, bid farewell to both Ryan and Kyle, and then headed to work. Throughout this period, the children were doing fine, with the only unusual occurrence being Kyle's early awakening that day. Eliza, their older sister, went to daycare as usual, but around 1 p.m., Ada's 911 call marked a dramatic turn of events. In a highly agitated state, Ada reported that Kyle, one of the children, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator guided Ada through performing CPR on Kyle, while paramedics rushed to the scene. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and took charge of Kyle's care. They questioned Ada, who was very distressed about what had happened. Ada explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle to bed in his crib and left to fetch his brother Ryan. When she returned with Ryan, Kyle suddenly began vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics treated Kyle, Ada phoned Renee to update her on the situation, providing a modified account of what had happened. According to Ada, after feeding the children, she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor, as was her usual practice, before going to fetch his brother. However, when she returned, she found Kyle vomiting. She went to the kitchen to grab a bowl to contain the vomit, and upon her return, she discovered that Kyle had fallen. Ada claimed she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the breathing rescue technique Renee had taught her, but it didn't work. She also attempted CPR. Following initial treatment, the paramedics rushed Kyle to the nearest hospital. By the time Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance carrying her son had already departed, but the police remained on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. Shortly after, the doctors decided to airlift Kyle to the Dallas Children's Hospital via helicopter. The Lazarchikics returned home, leaving Ada to care for Ryan, before heading to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada requested they keep her updated about Kyle's condition. Renee worried Ada might be too nervous to care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help at the house. Her friend arrived to find Ada upset, tearful, and concerned about Kyle's fall. Ada explained that Kyle suddenly fell, and she tried to revive him with CPR. She repeatedly expressed her love for Kyle, insisting she'd never harm him. At the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarchik family received devastating news about Kyle's condition. The doctor in charge reported that Kyle had suffered severe head injuries, including multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon explained to Mike and Renee that urgent action was needed to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, but sadly, his survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist also met with the parents and suggested that Kyle's injuries were consistent with abuse. The specialist emphasized that the injuries were extremely severe, equivalent to those sustained in a severe car accident or a fall from a 6th-floor height. Renee was stunned when she heard the news. At first, she suspected that Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries, which required a significant amount of force to inflict. This made an accident seem highly unlikely. Renee quickly arranged for another friend to pick up her son, Brian, and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly agitated at home, repeatedly calling Renee's friend to ask about Kyle's condition. When Renee's friend stepped out to pick up her son from school, Ada called her multiple times, inquiring about Kyle. However, when Renee's friend returned to the house, Ada appeared calm, no longer crying or talking. Just then, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada became hysterical, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no." She collapsed behind a door, repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. 2 female detectives arrived to question Ada, as she was the only adult present when the incident occurred and had called 911 to report the injured child. As the detectives arrived at the house, they heard Ada's cries and got out of their patrol car. Inside, they found Ada extremely agitated. Once she calmed down, she explained that she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor to help him burp after a meal. When Kyle started vomiting, Ada went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was away, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. Ada claimed she then took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. Upon learning the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story didn't add up, given Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell on the playroom floor after she left him alone. But the officers noted that the floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Ada then proposed that Kyle might have hit his head on the door frame when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's request, Ada demonstrated how this could have happened, adding that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any issues. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no signs of a strong impact. When Ada was questioned by the officers, She claimed the injury to her son Kyle was a result of a strong impact when she was running with him in her arms. She denied ever shaking or hitting him or his twin. However, the officers remained skeptical as the injury seemed inconsistent with Ada's story. They urged her to come clean, explaining that the truth could be crucial in saving Kyle's life. Despite their pleas, Ada refused to provide any further explanation. The officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigators arrived to process the house. After completing their work, they gave Renee's friend, who was staying at the house, the all-clear to clean and organize the property in preparation for the family's return. As Renee's friend and several others cleaned the house, they stumbled upon a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from a cabinet door under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape, causing it to become misaligned. They simply resecured it with the tape, but found it odd, as Renee was always meticulous about fixing broken items to prevent her children from getting hurt. Their curiosity piqued. They decided to report the discovery to the police. Shortly after, investigators returned to the scene to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it being held shut with adhesive tape before. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had been dashed. The doctors informed them that Kyle was clinically brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amidst overwhelming grief and indescribable pain, the couple made the difficult decision to authorize the removal of life support, after which Kyle sadly passed away 3 days later on October 17th. The detectives questioned Ada, who was imprisoned on suspicion of premeditated assault on a minor. Ada claimed that on the day before the incident, she was preparing macaroni and cheese at Renee's request. According to Ada, Kyle was sitting on the kitchen counter, fell off, and hit his head hard on the kitchen floor. She picked him up, checked for injuries, and found only redness on his ear and the right side of his head. Ada applied cold compressors and gave him a pain reliever. When asked why she hadn't shared this with the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She didn't tell Renee because Renee had a severe headache when she got home from work and requested the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet, due to her migraines. The detectives asked if Ada had fallen with the child, which she strongly denied. During the interrogation, Ada discovered that Kyle had died and broke down in tears for the rest of the interview. The judge charged Ada with aggravated homicide and set bail at $715, an amount neither Ada nor her family could afford, so she remained in custody until the trial. The police hinted that they might charge her with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The 2005 trial of Kyle's death case heard testimony from the doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital. The doctor reported that when Kyle arrived, he was already unconscious. Multiple bruises were found on the right side of his head, as well as on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas were also discovered on the right temple. The doctor identified 3 main areas of hematomas on Kyle's head, indicating 3 separate impacts. The bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle suffered from brain and retinal bleeding, consistent with severe trauma. And despite no broken bones, his brain tissue was significantly swollen, with an increased head pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury, far exceeding the normal 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the doctor concluded that Kyle's injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma, likely caused by hitting his head against a hard object. The doctor suggested that such injuries could result from violently shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. A forensic expert from Dallas County testified about the autopsy results, which revealed multiple overlapping small bruises on Kyle's scalp, as well as a couple of small scrapes on his right temple, spaced over a centimeter apart. The autopsy also showed 4 or 5 pairs of similar injuries on his head. The brain had suffered significant bleeding and swelling, with bleeding in the retinas of both eyes, indicating that a substantial amount of force was required to cause such injuries. The expert concluded that Kyle's death was a result of severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma, and agreed that it was possible that Kyle's head had been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. The expert discounted the possibility that Kyle's injuries were caused by simply bumping into a door frame or falling from the kitchen counter. A forensic analyst provided crucial testimony, measuring the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and finding it consistent with the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also examined the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door, uncovering 2 DNA traces. One of these traces had a significantly higher contribution and matched A's DNA, while the lesser trace remained unidentified. Next, Mike took the stand to testify. He recalled that Kyle was unharmed on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th, displaying no bruises. Mike explained that he had prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to retrieve utensils and food, and verified that all doors were in perfect condition at the time, including the one that was later mysteriously repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and engaged in playful activities with the twins, who were crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it's clear that Ada was the only adult in the house when the events leading to Kyle's death occurred. While the exact circumstances may never be known for certain, the prosecutor presented a possible scenario at trial. Kyle might have refused to eat his lunch, prompting Ada, who was distracted by watching a soap opera, to remove him from his high chair without noticing the open cabinet door. The prosecutor suggested that Ada's frustration or anger may have led her to attack Kyle's head with the cabinet door, which ultimately broke, leaving screw marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found Ada Cuadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, El Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over an appeal and poor defense. They sought appeal funding from Peru, U.S. communities, and solidarity groups. In prison, Ada consistently proclaimed her innocence and seized every opportunity to reiterate it in interviews. Her persistence eventually paid off when, in 2009, her lawyers filed an appeal, highlighting 5 specific mistakes made during the initial trial. The appeals court reviewed the case and dismissed 3 of the claims, but upheld 2. This was sufficient for the judges to quash the conviction and declare the trial null and void due to irregularities. In the aftermath of this ruling, Ada's family launched a new fundraising campaign to raise the $100,000 required to cover the costs of a new trial. It took 3 more years to prepare for the new trial, which finally began on July 10, 2012. The jury selection process started with over 100 candidates, and eventually 12 jurors were chosen. The trial was held at Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense team argued that Kyle's head injury occurred on October 12th, when he fell from the kitchen counter. They claimed that the situation worsened the following day, when Ada accidentally hit Kyle's head on the door frame while carrying him in her arms. This time around, the defense presented a new piece of evidence: testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. The expert suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused during his hospital stay, specifically when doctors inserted a catheter to assess brain swelling. However, the prosecution strongly disputed this new testimony. Additionally, David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, although he didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A pivotal moment in the trial came when Mike took the stand, recounting the heartbreaking final 2 days of Kyle's life. Mike described how Kyle was hooked up to multiple tubes and machines and ultimately being removed from life support with his parents by his side as he passed away. The defense team insisted that there wasn't sufficient evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution countered by emphasizing the medical findings and the numerous inconsistencies in Ada's story. Following the conclusion of the trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to review the 911 call recordings once more. In the end, they delivered a verdict. Ada Cuadros, age 33 at the time, was guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In prison, Ada occupied herself by joining the volleyball team learning Braille, and entering an art competition in which she won with a portrait of the Virgin Mary. She sold her winning artwork to raise money for a new appeal. Despite being behind bars, Ada remains adamant that she is innocent and her spirit remains unbroken. From her cell, she and her family persist in their efforts to secure an appeal, hoping to prove what they believe to be the truth. Darlene Tilly was born November 1, 1966 to Donnie and Patricia. She was described as a quiet, loving, passionate person. On September 14, 1980, 13-year-old Darlene and her best friend, Tammy Carden, spent the afternoon playing softball and hanging out at the Glen School ball field. Darlene was planning to walk home, and Tammy offered to walk with her, but Darlene declined and said she would walk alone. She was last seen by multiple witnesses walking on a service road near the woods north of Durham near I-85 about 530. 2 months later, on November 15th, hunters found her body in an area known as the Flats, about 60 to 70 feet off the Oxford Highway near Technica Parkway. It was located in an open field 8 miles from her home near railroad tracks. The coroner reported that she died of blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds. In an unfortunate incident, the results of her autopsy were later destroyed when the pipes burst in the courthouse where the records were being held. Darlene's unsolved murder is currently the oldest unsolved murder in North Carolina history, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. Very little is known about his family and upbringing. He never got married and didn't have any children. Strong worked at a local gas station and also as a security guard on a movie set. People who knew him described him as eccentric and arrogant, believing he was smarter than others. He enjoyed arguing and trying to prove his point until others agreed, but he wasn't typically aggressive. On September 11, 2017, a fisherman in Oshawa, Ontario, made a disturbing discovery in the city harbor. He found a badly disfigured and decomposed human torso floating in the water. The fisherman immediately reported his finding to the police, who retrieved the remains and sent them to forensics for analysis. Due to the body's severe decomposition, experts had a hard time identifying it. The torso was missing limbs and a head, and its internal organs were gone. The only clues about the victim were that she was a young woman between 18 and 25 years old. Her fingerprints, dental records, and distinguishing features couldn't be used for identification. A partial tattoo on her neck was visible, but its design was impossible to determine due to decomposition. As a result, a DNA analysis was the only remaining option, but no matches were found in the existing database. The police then began investigating cases of young women who had gone missing in recent months. In November 2017, nearly 2 months after the discovery, authorities identified the body as 18-year-old Rory Rush, a high school student who had vanished in mid-August. She was several weeks pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Divers searched the harbor and nearby Lake Ontario shoreline, but no other body parts were found. The time and cause of death remained unknown. Experts examined the body and found numerous severe injuries inflicted while Rory was still alive, suggesting she had been tortured over a long period before her death. This discovery led to a major breakthrough in the investigation. For months later, an unexpected twist emerged. In December, the Wood family moved into a house at 19 McMillan Drive, Oshawa, where they noticed an unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, 45-year-old Adam Strong, assured them it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix soon. The neighbor tried to be friendly and polite, but there was something unsettling about him. When David's wife tried to welcome him with homemade cookies, he refused to let her enter his apartment, instead stepping out into the hallway and quickly closing the door behind him. In that brief moment, she caught a glimpse of his living space, which was in disarray, and was overwhelmed by the foul smell inside. Adam took the cookies, thanked the neighbor, and quickly excused himself. Later, when they crossed paths in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that he was about to start renovations, and his apartment was not presentable at the time. Despite his polite demeanor, He seemed visibly nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore the unbearable smell. However, on December 29th, they finally called a plumber to investigate a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. Although the issue seemed minor and easily solvable, the discovery the workers made in the pipes was shocking. Even to experienced forensic experts, human body parts had been found. Sean Fenn, a plumber, and his partner were called to the Wood family's apartment to fix a clogged refrigerator drain. However, when they arrived, they were met with an overwhelming stench, which they soon discovered was coming from the apartment below, belonging to Adam Strong. Upon entering Strong's apartment, the smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Sean, an experienced plumber, had never encountered anything so foul-smelling in his career. While working to clear the pipe, Strong's behavior became increasingly strange and nervous. He refused to leave the area, constantly asking questions about the process. The plumbers tried to ignore Strong's antics, but what they discovered next would be shocking. As they extracted the blockage, they found over 10 kilograms of entangled flesh, hair, and bone fragments, including disfigured human fingers. Strong remained surprisingly calm, asking how the remains ended up in the pipe. Fenn immediately called the police, suspecting they had stumbled upon human remains in the pipes. When the police arrived, they confirmed the discovery of human flesh. Instead of denying the allegations, Strong calmly admitted that Rory Rush's body parts were stuck in the pipe, with additional remains stored in his freezer. A search of the freezer revealed a severed head, limb fragments, and more, all packed in plastic bags. The apartment was in disarray, with dirty dishes, rotting food, trash, and empty pizza boxes littering the floor. The police also found numerous adult magazines with sadistic content, as well as intimate toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and devices for binding and hanging, suggesting a disturbing atmosphere. Adam's social media profiles openly displayed his interest in BDSM practices, with explicit photos and videos. Although he didn't have a long-term partner, several former partners accused him of being abusive, leading to their breakups. He wrote reviews of adult films and magazines, indicating he spent most of his free time consuming such content. Behind his calm exterior, he led a secretive life. The police cordoned off Adam's residence, treating it as a crime scene. The initial investigation suggested that they had a lot of work ahead, with potential discoveries that could be just as shocking as the head found in the refrigerator. Notably, the evidence found led investigators to suspect that the discovered body parts belonged to Rory Hash, whose torso was found in a water body 4 months earlier. A distinctive tattoo on the neck and DNA analysis supported this theory. In Adam's house, investigators found disturbing evidence of a gruesome crime. Hidden among piles of trash were the blood-stained clothes and shoes of Rory Rush, later confirmed to be the missing schoolgirl. The bedroom, where her bed was found, was covered in her blood, with splatters on the walls, furniture, and ceiling. A dissection table was found in the kitchen, suggesting that the suspect had dismembered and gutted the girl there. The entire area was contaminated with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments. The bathroom was equally appalling, with dirt, blood, and signs of brutal acts everywhere. It appeared that Adam had attempted to dispose of the body by flushing it down the toilet in parts, but when this failed, he tried to fix the blockage himself. A large collection of sharp weapons was also found in the house, likely used to dismember the girl's body. Rory Hash was born in 1999 to a single mother, Shannon Dion. Despite her father's absence, Rory grew up in a loving environment. Thanks to her mother and grandmother, her family had a unique background, with her maternal grandfather founding a motorcycle club and being a skilled boxer with ties to the criminal underworld. Rory had a peaceful and carefree childhood, excelled in dance, and was an award-winning student. At 13, she received an award as the best cadet of the year in her local army unit. However, her life took a dramatic turn at 15 when she got introduced to drugs by a friend and became dependent. She began associating with questionable individuals, neglected her studies, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, Rory's family tried to get her help for her addiction, but she would relapse every time. At 17, She ran away from home and turned to prostitution to support her drug habit. Then, her mother got her into a specialized program for teenagers with addictions, which forced her into treatment. This time, the efforts paid off and Rory was able to get back on track. She got a job, studied remotely, and eventually earned her high school diploma. She started planning for college and began a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony. In June 2017, Rory told her mother that she was pregnant and planned to keep the baby. However, Rory's mother didn't know that her daughter had started using drugs again. Rory met with Constable Christopher Crane at a shopping center in mid-August. He had been monitoring her for 18 months to keep her away from negative influences. During their meeting, Rory confessed that she had started using drugs again and lost her job a month prior, often exchanging sexual favors for money or drugs. Constable Crane was deeply disturbed by her revelation and promised to help. He stepped away to make an urgent call to arrange for her hospitalization. However, when he returned, Rory was gone, and the constable was unable to find her. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her incoherent due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue and stepped out for about an hour. When they returned, they were shocked to discover that Rory had vanished, and sadly, she was never seen alive again. A review of hospital surveillance footage showed that Rory simply got up and left the hospital on her own. Her family reported her missing the next day, but despite an extensive search effort and widespread social media attention, no one was able to find her. It's likely that her addiction led her to seek out drugs at Strong's house, where she may have exchanged sexual favors for them. After Adam alerted the police to the location of the remaining body parts, an investigation was launched. Investigators expected him to cooperate, but instead, he became unresponsive and refused to answer questions at the police station. He remained calm and denied any wrongdoing. Because there was no direct evidence linking him to the girl's murder, Adam was only charged with desecrating a body. His lawyer's efforts to secure bail were unsuccessful, and he was held in jail awaiting trial. The investigators struggled to find an effective approach to questioning him, trying to elicit an emotional response that might provoke a confession. Strong was evasive when questioned about Rory's presence in his house and what he did to her, but openly discussed his fondness for bladed weapons and extensive knife collection. A thorough search of Adam's house uncovered a dirty hunting knife with dried skin fragments that appeared human in a hidden closet. Although the DNA from the knife didn't match Rory's, it belonged to another individual. It took several months to identify the owner of the DNA, but by July 2017, it was established that the traces on the weapon belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, Rory Rush, who had vanished about 10 years prior. Candace Fitzpatrick shared similarities with Rory. Both struggled with substance abuse and legal issues, grew up in troubled families, and had a history of running away from home for months at a time. To survive, she would live with acquaintances and exchange sex for food and drugs. Born in 1989, Candace was 18 when she disappeared. Her family didn't notice her absence initially and only reported her missing almost 2 years later, which time all leads had gone cold. Candace's life and social circle led many to believe she could have ended up anywhere. Her parents thought she had run away and held on to the hope that she would return. However, in 2018, the news from law enforcement crushed their hopes of ever seeing their daughter alive again. It's worth noting that both victims of the suspect were the same age and looked almost identical, like sisters. This led people to believe that the police had caught a serial predator. When questioned about the second woman, the suspect Adam unexpectedly agreed to cooperate in exchange for better living conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet access, and specific meals. Law enforcement officials were outraged by his demands, but they relented to get the information. Adam began his story by talking about his difficult childhood, including how he was abused by his stepfather from the age of 5. He also described how he started torturing and killing animals from the age of 7, finding physical pleasure in these acts. When the conversation turned to Rory, Adam Strong described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in it, but claiming he only did so because she had died from an overdose. However, the police did not believe him, and he was unable to convince them of his story. When questioned about Candace, who had disappeared 10 years prior, Strong was surprised the police knew about her. He tried to find out how they had discovered his secret, and when told about human flesh stuck to an old knife, he became somber and regretful for not taking better precautions to cover his tracks. Strong admitted to meeting Candace, but denied killing her. However, the evidence gathered did not support his claim. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he inadvertently incriminated himself. The police informed him that Rory was pregnant at the time of her death, which Strong vehemently denied. The detectives realized that Strong would argue endlessly to prove his point, so they decided to provoke him into revealing more than he intended. They insisted that the victim was pregnant, and Strong, trying to prove otherwise, described in detail how he had examined Rory's reproductive organs and felt a pulsation, leading the police to believe that she might have still been alive during the attack. Later, Strong tried to deny everything, but his statements had been recorded on camera and were presented in court. He refused to disclose what he had done with Candace's body, and her remains were never found. The detectives were unable to learn about any other possible victims. During one of the last interrogations, Strong callously stated that he would like his condolences to be passed on to Rory's parents. At the trial, his lawyers argued that Strong was mentally ill and unable to be held responsible for his actions. However, a psychiatric evaluation determined that despite certain disorders, Strong was aware of his actions and could be held legally accountable. The trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace's disappearance. Strong was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory. Although he never admitted his guilt, the evidence and his confessions left no doubt about his involvement in the heinous crimes. 4 of Strong's former partners also testified, describing his cruelty and violent tendencies. According to the prosecution, Strong had lured both women to his home, promising them money for intimate services, and then killed them. Adam Strong brutally murdered his victim, subjecting her to a prolonged and agonizing ordeal. He likely killed her out of fear that she would report him to the authorities. On September 4th, his mobile phone signal was detected near the city harbor, where he had dumped the victim's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was convicted of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Hash's remains. He received a life sentence without parole. However, showed no remorse, stating in his final remarks that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months into his sentence, Strong unexpectedly revealed the location of his first victim's remains. The police followed his directions, and after several months of searching, they discovered human bones. DNA testing confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, which was officially announced. Investigators believe that there may be additional victims in the Adam Strong case, possibly including at least one more woman. Notably, when Strong was initially arrested, his personal belongings were confiscated, including a chain with 3 rings. He later requested the items return, stating that the rings held sentimental value. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their dead daughters. However, the 3rd ring remains unidentified, sparking speculation about potential additional victims. 21-year-old Partina Epps lived in Inglewood, California in 2005. On April 26th, Partina's body was found lying in a carport in Gardena, California. Someone was backing out of one of the 4 stalls in the carport and then discovered her. A medical examiner determined that she had been strangled. Investigators found fingerprints that did not belong to Partina on her purse. There was also DNA from a man at the crime scene. They theorized that it belonged to the person that ended her life. Technology was not advanced enough for them to identify the culprit. Investigators could not find other useful leads, so the case went cold. In 2021, investigators took another look at Partina's case. They resubmitted forensic evidence from the crime scene using new technology. This led them to 56-year-old Charles Wright. He was arrested on January 27, 2022. Wright denied involvement in the crime. He said his fingerprints were on Partina's purse because he sold it to, according to him, at the time he was selling purses, tennis shoes, and clothing from the trunk of his car. Wright had a harder time explaining away why his DNA was found at the crime scene. Wright has been working as a teacher since 1999. He said he resigned from Inglewood Unified School District to fight the case against him. This is what he had to say. "I didn't do this. The thing is, everybody that knows me knows that I used to sell bags and clothes out of my car. That's the only possible way could happen." He said he believes people who purchased bags from him during that time period could confirm his story. County Administrator Erica F. Torres, head of Englewood Unified, told staff and parents in a letter dated Saturday that the district learned of the accusation the day before and that Wright would no longer be teaching at any of its schools. Wright is scheduled for arraignment on June 28, 2022. Authorities said that anyone with 79-year-old Viola Hagen lived alone in an apartment in Anaheim, California, 1980. On February 18, 1980, a neighbor of Viola became concerned about her whereabouts. Viola was often seen walking around the apartment complex, but she hadn't been seen for 2 days. The neighbor stepped inside Viola's unit and found her lifeless body. She had been assaulted and strangled. Over the years, detectives attempted to solve the case, pursuing new leads or bits of evidence, but failed to identify a suspect, and the case went cold. In September of 2020, the case was reopened. This time, investigators turned to genetic genealogy, which has been used to solve hundreds of cases across the U.S. Investigators used DNA found on Viola and compared it with genetic profiles on genealogy databases. This led investigators to 64-year-old Andre William LePere. He was arrested on April 28, 2021, at his home in Alamogordo, New Mexico, in connection to the case. He is being held without bail at an Otero County jail. It is not believed that Andre and Viola knew each other. Viola's family had this to say in a statement: "Our grandmother, Viola, was a beautiful, happy soul and did not deserve being violated in her final years of life. We are so grateful for the Anaheim Police Department never giving up after 41 years. That is our message: never, never give up." LePere was in his 20s at the time of the crime and lived close to Viola in Anaheim, California. Sometime in the 1990s, he moved east. He split his time between Arizona and New Mexico. LePere worked as a plumber and a truck driver. He married twice and had 2 children. Investigators had not established a motive for the crime. In February of 2022, LePere was convicted for the crime. He will be sentenced on May 13th. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any info, stop seeking the truth.